Everything you think you know about America's ancient past is about to change. The true rulers of this land, long before any history books begin, were not who you've been taught. For centuries, the pages of our past have offered a singular narrative, a comforting story of discovery and evolution. But beneath these familiar layers of time, beneath the very soil we walk upon, lies a profound secret, a truth so monumental it could redefine everything we understand about humanity's journey. So sit back, relax, and let the gentle current of forgotten history wash over you as we delve into the quiet mystery of a continent reborn. The established story of ancient America is etched firmly into our collective consciousness. It speaks of intrepid peoples migrating across a land bridge from Asia, of hunter-gatherer societies slowly evolving, spreading across vast plains and dense forests. This narrative, painstakingly assembled by archaeologists and historians, paints a detailed picture of indigenous cultures, their lives, their migrations, and their eventual flourishing across two immense continents. We are told of their resourcefulness, their spirituality, and their deep connection to the land. This is the accepted, mainstream account, supported by countless excavations and academic consensus, a seemingly complete and unshakable history. But what if this widely accepted story is missing an entire, monumental chapter? What if beneath the familiar layers of time, there lies evidence of an earlier, more formidable presence? Consider for a moment the sheer scale of the American continent, its vastness almost incomprehensible. Is it truly possible that our understanding, however comprehensive, has captured every single whisper, every footprint left upon its ancient soil? Some researchers quietly suggest a profound oversight, a fundamental gap in our historical framework that has left an entire epoch of history either overlooked or, more unsettlingly, quietly set aside. Could it be that foundational elements of early American history have been miscategorized, or perhaps never truly integrated into the dominant narrative? What if new discoveries, or even a fresh perspective on old ones, could unravel the tightly woven fabric of accepted history, revealing patterns we never imagined? The very notion challenges us to open our minds, to question the bedrock of our understanding. If the very foundations of our historical knowledge are incomplete, what incredible secrets might still lie buried, waiting to shift our perception of who we are and where we come from? Deep within the shadows of these overlooked narratives, a startling concept emerges: the possibility of a race of giants. Not mythical creatures from storybooks, but flesh and blood beings, far larger than modern humans, who once walked these lands. For many, the idea of giants is instantly dismissed, relegated to the realms of folklore, a charming but untrue relic of ancient storytelling. We are taught that these tales, found in nearly every culture across the globe, are purely allegorical, symbolic representations of powerful forces or ancestral heroes, with no basis in archaeological fact. They are seen as the imaginative constructs of early peoples, a way to explain the unexplainable, or simply to entertain around a fire. But the sheer volume and striking consistency of claims, spanning centuries and countless cultures across the Americas, suggests that perhaps these aren't just fanciful tales. What if these legends, dismissed as mere fantasy, are in fact distorted memories of a real past? From the vast plains of the Midwest to the rugged mountains of the West, and down into the ancient lands of Central and South America, indigenous oral traditions recount stories of giant beings. These are not always benevolent figures. Sometimes they are wise rulers, other times formidable enemies, or even primal forces of nature. Could oral traditions, passed down through countless generations with remarkable fidelity, hold kernels of historical truth that mainstream science has been too quick to discard? Some speculative theories suggest that ancient texts and indigenous legends worldwide speak of such beings, not as gods or pure myth, but as powerful inhabitants of a bygone era, whose physical presence left an indelible mark. What if a distinct hominid species, possessing significantly greater stature and perhaps strength, once thrived on this continent, leaving an impression so profound it resonated through millennia of storytelling? The theory posits not merely isolated tall individuals, but a widespread, influential group whose existence could fundamentally reshape our understanding of early human populations and their interactions. If these giants were more than myth, how did they live? What did they build, and what became of them? The very notion of a giant race forces a direct and uncomfortable confrontation with the established timelines and accepted theories of human migration and cultural development in the Americas. Our current historical framework meticulously charts human arrival, primarily via the Bering Strait, and then traces the subsequent evolution of cultures and civilizations, leaving little to no room for a pre-existing, non-indigenous, colossal population. This framework is robust, built upon decades of dedicated research, carbon dating, and genetic studies. It forms the backbone of our understanding of ancient America, a narrative that explains origins, dispersals, and developments in a logical, scientific sequence. The idea of giants, it seems, simply does not fit into this carefully constructed puzzle. But to truly understand the past, we must be willing to question even our most cherished assumptions, to examine the pieces that seem out of place. When anomalies appear, too numerous or too consistent to easily ignore, do we adjust the narrative, or do we simply dismiss the evidence that challenges our comfort? The challenge posed by the giant hypothesis isn't merely about adding a new footnote to an existing history book. It's about fundamentally redrawing the entire map of ancient human activity. Could it be that the scientific community, perhaps inadvertently, overlooked or miscategorized evidence that simply did not fit the prevailing paradigm of their time? Academic progress, while often revolutionary, also moves within established boundaries, and new, disruptive ideas can face significant resistance. Some voices suggest that the rigid structure of academic history can, at times, become resistant to information that forces a complete reevaluation, especially when it contradicts long-held beliefs or established careers. What if new methodologies, new discoveries, or simply a fresh, unbiased look at old finds could unravel this tightly woven fabric, revealing entirely new patterns of settlement and interaction that defy current explanations? The question isn't just about belief, but about the openness of inquiry. How much more of our past remains obscured, simply because it doesn't align with the stories we've grown comfortable telling ourselves? This brings us to a deeper, more unsettling possibility, that some truths are not merely forgotten, but actively concealed or suppressed. The silence surrounding these potential giant discoveries, the dismissals that often accompany their reporting, and the occasional allegations of lost evidence all hint at this troubling notion. Skeptics argue, quite reasonably, that such claims are most often the result of misidentification, hoaxes, or poor archaeological practice. They suggest that large bones are often confused with animal remains, or that the romantic imagination of early settlers and journalists sometimes exaggerated findings. It's an explanation that fits neatly into the conventional scientific view, dismissing the unusual as simply mistaken, easily explained by conventional science and a rational worldview. But the consistent pattern of reports vanishing, the quiet shelving of unusual finds, and the almost uniform discrediting of those who pursue these inquiries, begs a critical question. Is there more than just oversight or simple error at play? What if certain pieces of knowledge, deemed too unsettling or revolutionary for the prevailing academic or public consciousness, were systematically removed from easy access, slowly fading into the realm of legend and conspiracy? Could powerful institutions, perhaps seeking to maintain a stable historical narrative, inadvertently or even deliberately minimized information that challenged the status quo? Some speculate about a desire to protect established academic careers, to maintain funding streams tied to accepted theories, or even to preserve national identities from disruptive truths that could force a complete reevaluation of foundational myths. The concept of suppressed truths often feels like the stuff of fiction, the domain of thrillers and secret societies. Yet history itself is replete with instances where uncomfortable facts were indeed pushed to the margins, only to re-emerge much later. What profound implications would emerge if we were to finally lift the veil on these hidden chapters and discover that our understanding of ancient America, and perhaps ourselves, was built on an incomplete foundation? The journey into these profound questions begins now. We will venture beyond the accepted narratives, sift through the sands of time, examine the physical clues, and listen closely to the whispers of ancient peoples, seeking to understand if the echoes of giants are indeed real. So let your mind wander through the landscapes of forgotten history as we prepare to unearth the incredible, hidden truths of ancient America. We continue our quiet journey through the hidden corners of America's past, where the very ground beneath our feet seems to whisper tales that defy our modern understanding. We've pondered the notion of a forgotten history, a truth obscured by time and perhaps by design. Tonight, we turn our gaze to the most tangible of clues, the bones themselves. Across the vast landscape of America, buried beneath layers of soil and centuries of silence, stories of colossal human remains have surfaced. These aren't just whispers in old books. They are persistent accounts, documented in local newspapers, historical society records, and even early scientific journals. Imagine, if you will, the astonishment of early settlers and archaeologists digging into ancient mounds, only to uncover skeletons of proportions that stagger belief. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, reports frequently emerged from states like Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and California, describing human skeletons measuring 7, 8, and even 9 feet tall. These accounts often spoke of robust bones, massive skulls, and sometimes unusual anatomical features. The mainstream interpretation of these findings over time shifted dramatically. Initially, some early researchers and communities accepted these as extraordinary human anomalies, perhaps the remains of particularly tall Native American individuals or isolated genetic variations. As anthropology and archaeology became more formalized, however, a different narrative took hold. Many of these reports were dismissed as hoaxes, sensationalized newspaper stories designed to sell copies, or misidentifications of animal bones. In instances where legitimate human remains were found, their immense size was often attributed to exaggeration, or simply considered to be very tall individuals from known populations, rather than a distinct type of human. The prevailing scientific view concluded that no evidence existed for a distinct race of giants in ancient America, and that any seemingly oversized remains were either errors, frauds, or isolated cases within the normal human spectrum. But there is a lingering problem with this blanket dismissal. The sheer volume and astonishing consistency of these reports present a challenge to conventional explanation. We aren't talking about one or two isolated incidents. We are talking about hundreds of accounts, spanning decades and stretching from coast to coast. These reports were often made by seemingly credible individuals, doctors, land surveyors, farmers, newspaper editors, and even early academic researchers. They described similar dimensions, often noting thick skulls, large teeth, and heavy bone structure. Could so many independent observers in so many different locations all be victims of the same illusion, perpetrating the same hoax, or making the same mistaken identification? The frequency and descriptive overlap begin to suggest a pattern, not a series of unrelated anomalies. This leads us to consider alternative theories, ideas that push beyond the accepted boundaries of human history. Could these consistent reports, rather than individual exaggerations, represent genuine evidence of a distinct ancient human species or a unique race. Some researchers propose that before the established Native American migrations, or perhaps coexisting with them, there was a population of people who were simply built on a grander scale. They speculate that these individuals were not merely tall, but genetically predisposed to an exceptional physical stature, with proportionally larger bones and musculature. This theory posits a forgotten lineage, a branch of humanity whose immense size set them apart, and whose existence has been largely erased or overlooked in our standard historical narratives. Could the very ground have held the secrets of these colossal beings, waiting for our tools to bring them to light, before our interpretations push them back into the shadows? If these reports held a grain of truth, then the anthropological record we accept today might be profoundly incomplete. If these numerous accounts truly speak of ancient giant skeletons, what then became of these colossal individuals and their story? And why did their discovery, once seemingly common, fade from our collective memory and scientific discourse? Let us delve deeper into specific accounts, for it is in the details that the mystery often crystallizes. Consider the discoveries made in the burial mounds of West Virginia. In the 1880s, archaeologists exploring the Grave Creek Mound, one of the largest conical mounds in North America, reported finding skeletons of unusual size. One account from 1838 describes a skeleton over 7 feet tall, found in a vault within the mound, adorned with copper bracelets. Other similar reports from nearby mounds detailed individuals reaching 8 or even 9 feet. These weren't isolated bones. They were often found within structured burials, suggesting deliberate interment. The mainstream explanations for these specific findings are often equally dismissive. The Grave Creek Mound reports, for instance, are sometimes attributed to early, less rigorous archaeological methods, or the common exaggeration of frontier tales. Skeptics suggest that bones found disarticulated, or from multiple individuals, could be reassembled in a way that creates an illusion of greater height. Or perhaps, they argue, an individual who was genuinely very tall, perhaps over 7 feet, was simply seen as a giant by the standards of the time, and their height then became mythologized and inflated in subsequent retellings. The lack of detailed, peer-reviewed scientific analysis on these specific specimens in modern times is often cited as reason enough to doubt their extraordinary claims. But here is the but moment, the pivot where doubt takes root. When we examine the cumulative narrative, the distinct patterns begin to emerge. The descriptions of these finds often include details beyond mere height, exceptionally thick cranial bones, massive jawlines, and sometimes even reports of anomalous dentition, such as double rows of teeth or an unusual number of molars. These are not descriptions easily dismissed as simple exaggerations of tall individuals. The accounts are often specific, given by individuals who were familiar with human anatomy, like doctors or anatomists. The consistent recurrence of these specific, non-standard features across disparate finds, in widely separated geographical locations, suggests something more than coincidental misinterpretation. It implies a shared characteristic among the individuals being discovered. This leads us down paths of alternative theories, where the boundaries of conventional anthropology begin to blur. What if these specific anatomical peculiarities point not just to tall people, but to a distinct variant of humanity? Could these be the physiological remnants of a unique ancient species, a divergence in the human family tree that left behind individuals of immense stature and distinct features? Some theorists suggest these skeletal remains are evidence of an ancient hominid lineage, perhaps a different branch of early human or hominin evolution that thrived in ancient America. Others even propose that these might be the descendants of a lost civilization, whose advanced genetic understanding allowed for controlled biological development, or who simply represented a pre-Diluvian form of humanity, more robust and larger in stature than modern humans. The consistency in describing characteristics beyond height, such as cranial thickness or dental anomalies, begs us to consider that these were not just tall individuals, but beings with fundamental physiological differences. How could so many distinct reports converge on such similar, impossible descriptions without some underlying, extraordinary truth? The uniformity of these exceptional details makes us question the simple dismissal of individual cases. As the 20th century dawned, bringing with it a more formalized and institutionalized approach to archaeology and anthropology, the narrative surrounding giant discoveries began to shift dramatically. Before this period, numerous publications, ranging from local gazettes to scientific journals of the time, regularly detailed discoveries of oversized human remains. Reports were common from California, where prospectors and early settlers unearthed large skeletons, to the Midwest, where mound explorations continued. Newspapers from the late 1800s, for instance, reported discoveries like the Lompoc giant in California, a skeleton allegedly over 12 feet tall, found with double rows of teeth, which was subsequently taken by the Smithsonian Institution, never to be publicly seen again in its original form. From Gas City, Indiana, accounts spoke of a burial mound yielding skeletons ranging from 8 to 9 feet tall, with unusually large leg bones and jaw bones described as vast enough to fit over the face of an ordinary man. The mainstream explanation for this shift is often framed as the natural progression of scientific rigor. As professional archaeology emerged, its primary goal was to establish clear, consistent timelines and migration patterns for human populations, largely within accepted evolutionary models. Within this framework, evidence of a distinct race of giants simply didn't fit. Reports of such finds were increasingly classified as either folklore, unsubstantiated claims from amateur explorers, or sensationalized journalism. Any truly large human bones were often reinterpreted as exceptionally tall individuals within known human populations, with their reported heights scaled down or categorized as anomalies. The growing influence of institutions like the Smithsonian Institution played a key role in centralizing archaeological research, and with this centralization came a more uniform and restrictive interpretation of human history. But here is the profound, the chilling pivot that compels us to look deeper. This institutional shift coincided with a marked decline in publicly acknowledged giant discoveries, despite the earlier prevalence of such reports. It wasn't that the ground suddenly stopped yielding large bones. It was that the interpretation and public reporting of what was found fundamentally changed. Many historical accounts describe significant discoveries being transported to major institutions, only to vanish from public view or be reclassified into less sensational categories. The sheer number of accounts of giant remains that simply disappeared from the official record or were quietly reinterpreted raises a critical question. Did the giants themselves vanish, or did the official narrative, now formalized and consolidated, simply decide they never existed in the first place? The historical record suggests a wealth of discoveries that, instead of being openly discussed and analyzed, simply faded into obscurity from official discourse. This opens the door to deeply unsettling alternative theories. Some researchers, looking at the historical trend, speculate about a deliberate program of suppression. They propose that as a coherent narrative of human history was being constructed, one that fit prevailing theories of evolution, migration, and the established timelines of civilization, any evidence that directly contradicted this picture became an inconvenient truth. The existence of a distinct giant race in ancient America would have shattered existing paradigms about human origins and migrations, potentially forcing a complete reevaluation of established scientific and historical frameworks. Therefore, it is theorized Evidence such as giant skeletal remains was systematically reclassified, stored away in obscure archives, or even quietly discarded to maintain the integrity of the accepted historical narrative. This wasn't necessarily a malicious conspiracy, some argue, but rather an institutional bias to protect and defend an evolving scientific consensus against what was deemed fringe or unscientific evidence. What happens to inconvenient evidence when it doesn't align with the accepted scientific paradigm? And what profound truths might have been lost in that silent process of reclassification and disappearance? The very absence of these reported giants from our modern museums and academic papers becomes, for some, a powerful piece of evidence in itself. Let us now consider the sheer, cumulative weight of these observations. Over centuries, hundreds of reports from across a vast geographical expanse of ancient America speak not merely of tall individuals, but of asterisk giants. These were beings sometimes described with the astonishing characteristics of double rows of teeth, incredibly powerful builds, and distinct cranial features, found alongside artifacts of immense size. These are not merely individual anecdotes. They form a rich tapestry of consistent, repeated observations that span generations. From a modern anthropological perspective, these narratives are almost universally dismissed. The scientific consensus holds that these accounts are best understood as products of an era lacking rigorous scientific methodology, rife with sensationalist journalism, or outright hoaxes perpetrated for various motives. There are no definitive, scientifically verified giant skeletons, matching these extraordinary descriptions, that are publicly accessible in major museum collections or thoroughly documented in modern academic literature. The absence of such smoking gun evidence in current scientific archives is often presented as conclusive proof that the phenomenon of an ancient giant race never existed. But once more we reach our moment, the critical juncture where logic forces us to pause. To dismiss all asterisk of these historical accounts in their entirety requires an extraordinary and statistically improbable amount of coincidence, widespread misidentification, and mass delusion. The consistency in descriptions across time and geography, and the involvement of individuals who, by the standards of their era, were considered reputable, local doctors, landowners, early explorers, stretches the credulity of a blanket dismissal. Are we truly to believe that every single one asterisk of these hundreds of distinct reports, many with similar details, was either a mistake, an intentional fabrication, or the product of widespread fantasy? The sheer statistical improbability of such a widespread and consistent pattern of errors compels us to reconsider. This leads us to the most unsettling of alternative theories, one that suggests a deliberate historical void. The very absence of this physical evidence in public collections today, despite the historical abundance of reports, is seen by many as compelling evidence of a systematic historical suppression. They propose that these remains did exist, representing a distinct, physically superior race that either predated or coexisted with early Native American groups. Their disappearance from the official record, rather than indicating non-existence, might instead be due to a deliberate removal from the public consciousness. This could have been driven by a desire to maintain a neat, linear historical narrative, to avoid challenging religious doctrines, or perhaps even to control the understanding of human origins. The lost nature of this evidence suggests not its original absence, but rather a deliberate erasure, for reasons we are only now, in the quiet of this exploration, beginning to contemplate. If the physical evidence of ancient giants was indeed so widespread, yet now seems almost entirely gone from our official records, what does this tell us about the mechanisms by which history is written? And, perhaps more disturbingly, sometimes unwritten. We are left with not just a physical mystery, but a profound question about the very nature of historical truth, and what we choose to remember or forget about our ancient past. This lingering question echoes as we prepare to examine the monumental structures that, some believe, only beings of such stature could have constructed. The echoes of enormous beings, whose very existence challenges our understanding of America's deep past, ripple through the ancient landscapes. If their bones truly rest beneath the soil, as some believe, then what other indelible marks did they leave upon the land? What silent giants of earth and stone whisper tales of their forgotten strength, their monumental ambition? As we journey deeper into the continent's hidden history, we find ourselves confronting structures so vast, so precise, that they compel us to rethink who truly possessed the capability and knowledge for such colossal feats. Across the vastness of North America, from the fertile river valleys of the Midwest to the coastal plains, lie thousands of ancient earthworks and mounds. These aren't merely small burial sites, but sprawling, meticulously engineered complexes. They are a silent testament to an immense past, yet their true architects remain shrouded in the mists of time. Consider the enigmatic complex known as Poverty Point in present-day Louisiana. Here, roughly 3,500 years ago, a culture we know little about constructed a series of 6 concentric earthen ridges, nearly a mile across, forming precise octagonal patterns. Beyond these rings lie immense mounds, including a bird-shaped effigy mound reaching 70 feet into the sky. The sheer scale is staggering. Estimates suggest that over 1 million cubic yards of earth were moved to create this monument. To put that into perspective, it would take hundreds of modern dump trucks running continuously for years to accomplish the same feat. Yet this was done without metal tools, without wheeled vehicles, without beasts of burden. Just human hands and an unshakable vision. Further north, nestled in the rolling hills of Ohio, lies the Great Serpent Mound, a colossal effigy nearly a quarter-mile long, winding gracefully across the landscape. This serpentine form, so perfectly sculpted, aligns with key astronomical events, pointing to the summer solstice sunset and the winter solstice sunrise, as well as the equinoxes. Its curves and coils suggest a deep understanding of cosmology and a profound connection to the heavens. The precision required to lay out such a massive, sinuous shape over undulating terrain, without aerial perspective or advanced surveying equipment, is truly baffling. The very act of shaping so much earth into such an intricate, symbolic form speaks of a singular dedication, a level of communal organization and artistic vision that beggars belief for a culture often described as relatively simple. Perhaps even more astounding are the Newark earthworks, also in Ohio. This sprawling complex once encompassed miles of geometrically perfect enclosures, vast circles, precise squares, and a monumental octagon, all connected by parallel walls. The octagon earthwork, covering 50 acres, is so accurate that its alignment with the lunar standstill cycle, which occurs every 18.6 years, is within a fraction of a degree. This sophisticated astronomical observatory, built entirely of earth, demonstrates a mastery of geometry, astronomy, and engineering that seems utterly impossible for a pre-contact culture, who possessed the knowledge to survey such immense distances with such unerring accuracy. What methods allowed them to maintain perfect angles and straight lines over miles of changing topography? The very landscape was transformed into a colossal clock and calendar, a monumental expression of celestial understanding. Then there is Cahokia Mounds, near modern-day St. Louis, Missouri. This was once a thriving pre-Columbian city, larger than London was in the same period, home to tens of thousands. At its heart rises Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the Americas. With a base larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza and rising over 100 feet, it required an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth to construct. Imagine the scale of the undertaking. Basket load by basket load, carried by individuals, without the aid of even basic shovels or carts. The mind struggles to comprehend the sheer human effort, the organizational prowess, and the generations of sustained labor required to erect such a colossal monument. And Cahokia wasn't just Monk's Mound. It was a vast network of over 120 mounds, plazas, and carefully planned urban spaces. The implication of tools, or at least construction techniques, capable of moving and shaping such immense quantities of earth, lingers like an unanswered question in the vast quiet of these ancient sites. Mainstream archaeology offers a widely accepted explanation for these monumental earthworks. They are attributed to various known Native American cultures, the Adena, Hopewell, and Mississippian peoples for the mounds and geometric enclosures of the Ohio Valley and Midwest, and the ancestors of modern Native Americans for sites like Poverty Point. The prevailing theory suggests that these incredible structures were built through sheer collective human effort. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of individuals would have worked together over many decades, even centuries. They would have used simple tools, digging sticks made of wood, hoes fashioned from shell or stone, and baskets woven from plant fibers to carry the earth. These monumental constructions, it is said, served multiple purposes: as burial sites for important leaders, platforms for temples or elite residences, defensive fortifications, and ceremonial spaces for religious rituals and astronomical observations. The organization required, it is believed, arose from complex hierarchical societies, where powerful chiefs or religious leaders could command and coordinate the immense labor force needed for such projects. This picture paints a vivid scene of industrious, highly organized ancient. And what about the sheer volume of earth moved? At Cahokia, the estimate of 22 million cubic feet for Monk's Mound alone represents an enormous undertaking. Even with a workforce of thousands, using simple baskets and digging sticks, the energy expenditure would have been immense. Maintaining such a vast labor force, fed and supplied without advanced agricultural techniques or extensive trade networks, also presents a logistical puzzle. The timeframes suggested, often over generations, seem plausible, but the consistency of purpose and design over such long periods, especially for cultures often characterized by shifting settlements, raises questions about the stability and longevity of the political and social structures required. The implied physics and engineering knowledge are also astounding. To construct massive mounds that resist erosion and stand for millennia requires a deep understanding of soil mechanics, drainage, and structural integrity. These aren't just piles of dirt. They are engineered landscapes built to last. For cultures without written languages or established engineering schools, this implicit knowledge seems almost innate, or perhaps inherited from a source we haven't yet identified. The conventional explanation, while acknowledging the remarkable achievement, often struggles to fully reconcile the immense how with the limited what in terms of known technology and societal structure. Could the conventional builders, as we understand them, truly have been capable of such an astonishing transformation of the landscape, on such an epic scale? The weight of the earth, the demands of the labor, the unwavering precision, all press down on the traditional narrative, creating a palpable sense of mystery. This leads us to ponder alternative theories, concepts that reach beyond the established narrative, inviting us to imagine a different kind of past for ancient America. Could it be that the conventional builders possessed lost, advanced methods, unknown techniques for moving earth and stone that have simply vanished from historical record? Perhaps a sophisticated understanding of leverage, or the properties of different types of earth, allowed them to work with an efficiency we cannot yet comprehend. Some have even speculated about a profound mastery of acoustic levitation, or other forgotten principles of physics, to aid in the manipulation of massive materials, though such ideas linger at the very fringes of scientific thought. But these theories, while intriguing, still leave a gap when confronted with the raw physical demands of these sites. What if, however, the problem isn't just lost methods, but lost asterisk builders? This is where the whispers of a larger, stronger race, the enormous beings whose physical remains we explored earlier, resonate most powerfully. If a race of giants truly walked this continent, as historical accounts and scattered skeletal evidence suggest, then the construction of these colossal earthworks takes on an entirely new dimension of plausibility. Imagine a workforce where individuals possess not just human strength, but the strength of multiple humans. A being 6, 8, or even 10 feet tall, with correspondingly greater muscle mass and bone density, would be capable of carrying far heavier loads of earth, of moving larger stones, and of digging with significantly more force and endurance. The sheer physical advantage of such a race would dramatically reduce the perceived impossibility of these constructions. The thousands of individuals required for conventional explanations might be halved, or even quartered if those individuals were giants. Their longer reach would allow them to manipulate materials differently. Their greater stride would make transport more efficient. The arduous, backbreaking labor that would consume generations of conventional humans might have been accomplished in a fraction of the time, with a fraction of the perceived strain, by this forgotten race of colossal proportions. The vision for projects like Cahokia or the Newark earthworks, which seem so incredibly ambitious for a small-statured people with simple tools, becomes entirely congruent with the capabilities of a race of giants. Their physical prowess would not only explain the how, but perhaps also the scale of their ambition, their desire to leave such immense and enduring marks on the land. They might have been the true architects, capable of directing or even performing much of the heavy lifting, shaping the continent with a strength that defies our modern understanding of ancient human limitations. Could it be that these structures are not merely the work of our direct human ancestors, but the legacy of a distinct, physically superior race, perhaps even a lost civilization whose very existence challenges the timelines of human development in America? Perhaps the indigenous peoples who later inhabited these sites, and to whom we attribute their construction, were inheriting and maintaining the remnants of a much older, grander building tradition. This profound enigma of who possessed the capability and knowledge for these monumental feats compels us to look beyond the easy answers, to question the established narratives, and to open our minds to the possibility that the foundations of America's history are built on secrets yet to be fully uncovered. These massive earthworks and impossibly precise structures are more than just ancient ruins. They are questions etched into the very landscape of North America. If their builders were not merely the ancestors we have been taught to recognize, but a forgotten race of giants, then what other marvels might they have created? What deeper secrets do these colossal mounds and precise alignments hold, waiting for us to unlock the truth of America's most ancient and mysterious architects? Beyond the enigmatic remains of massive earthworks and the impossibly large tools scattered across the ancient landscapes of North America, another, even more intimate form of evidence whispers to us from the distant past. These are the oral traditions, the ancient stories, passed down through countless generations by the indigenous peoples who have called this land home for millennia. These aren't merely quaint myths or simple fables. They are living histories, remembered in song, ceremony, and the spoken word, each echoing with accounts of beings of immense stature, a race of giants. For many years, the academic consensus has largely viewed these rich narratives as pure folklore, imaginative tales crafted to explain natural phenomena, impart moral lessons, or define cultural identity. They are often seen as symbolic and allegorical, a vital part of indigenous heritage, but not as literal historical records. The figures within them, if larger than life, are typically categorized as archetypal heroes, tricksters, or primordial creators, rather than actual inhabitants of the ancient world. This perspective places them firmly in the realm of myth, separating them from the verifiable timeline of human history. But what if these tales hold more than just allegory? What if the pervasive echoes of giants, reverberating through hundreds of distinct tribal traditions, are not merely products of vivid imagination, but fragmented memories of actual beings, real encounters woven into the very fabric of ancient tribal history? The sheer consistency and widespread nature of these accounts, found across vast geographical and cultural divides, compel us to ask if something more tangible underpins these stories. Some researchers believe that these widespread legends could represent a form of historical record, a collective memory of a time when colossal beings truly walked this land. They propose that ancient storytellers, far from being mere myth-makers, might have been chroniclers, preserving truths that modern science, constrained by its own frameworks, has too readily dismissed. What if these legends are not just stories about the past, but the actual past, remembered through a cultural lens that our contemporary mindset struggles to interpret? If these stories are indeed echoes of history, if they are chronicles whispered across the ages, what forgotten chapter of ancient America do they truly reveal? Consider, for instance, the powerful traditions of the Sioux, a nation renowned for its rich oral history and deep connection to the land. Their narratives speak not just of tall men, but of the astonished giants, sometimes referred to as the Omahas. These beings were described as far more than just unusually large humans. They were portrayed as possessing immense strength, sometimes said to have skin like stone, an imposing and terrifying presence that roamed their ancestral lands long ago. The Omahas were not benevolent figures. They were often depicted as formidable adversaries, a constant threat whose physical prowess dwarfed that of ordinary people, capable of tremendous feats of destruction or construction. Mainstream anthropology typically categorizes such figures as classic mythological entities. The astonished giants might be interpreted as personifications of natural forces, such as mountains or rock formations, or as ancient, exaggerated enemies, their attributes symbolic rather than literal. The notion of stone skin, for example, is often seen as a metaphor for their unyielding strength or invulnerability in battle, rather than a physical characteristic of a race. This approach effectively deflates the literalism of the tales, placing them safely within the boundaries of fantasy. Yet, the consistency in the descriptions of these Omahas, the persistent emphasis on their truly great size, their extraordinary strength, and their distinct otherness, suggests something more specific than a generalized monster. These accounts describe a particular kind of adversary, one whose physical attributes were so pronounced that they were remembered with vivid detail, a kind of being distinct from any known human tribe. The specific fear and respect they commanded in the narratives indicate a memory of a truly exceptional, physically superior entity. Could the Omahas be a folk memory of a genuinely large, physically imposing people who once inhabited the plains? Perhaps a race whose strength and build were so formidable, so unlike the common stature of humans, that they were etched into the tribal consciousness as giants, their physical traits exaggerated over generations, but rooted in the reality of their exceptional size and power. These aren't just vague tales. They are often detailed accounts of encounters and struggles, suggesting a real historical interaction. If the Sioux's narratives of the Omahas reflect a tangible, giant presence in the ancient plains, how did these powerful beings interact with the ancestors of the Sioux, and what became of them? Did they simply vanish, leaving only their colossal legend behind? Perhaps one of the most compelling and specific legends comes from the Paiute people of Nevada, whose oral history describes a race known as the Sitka. The Paiutes speak of these beings as a race of formidable, aggressive giants, distinctive for their reddish hair, who inhabited the Lovelock Cave area. These giants were not just tall. They were described as cannibals, a constant and terrifying menace to the Paiute. The Paiute lore recounts a dramatic struggle where the tribes eventually banded together, trapping and eliminating the CTK within the very cave that bears their name today. This is a story passed down with great detail and a sense of profound historical significance, marking a pivotal moment in Paiute history. Academics often interpret this legend as a powerful tribal myth, perhaps an allegorical explanation for ancient rivalries with other Native American groups, or a cautionary tale about dangerous outsiders. The distinctive red hair is frequently dismissed as a symbolic attribute, a literary device to mark them as other or foreign, rather than a literal physical characteristic. The gruesome detail of cannibalism is seen as a common mythological trope to depict ultimate evil. This interpretation positions the CTK as purely mythical figures, their story divorced from any literal historical event. But the striking specificity of red hair and the precise geographical location mentioned, Lovelock Cave, align in a curiously unsettling way with documented discoveries made in the early 20th century. Miners working in Lovelock Cave reported finding numerous human remains of extraordinary size, some reportedly 7 to 10 feet tall, and critically, many were described as possessing reddish hair. These discoveries, often sensationalized in local newspapers, created a tangible, if controversial, link between Paiute oral tradition and physical finds. This confluence of detailed indigenous narrative and repeated, if often dismissed, archaeological reports creates a profound dissonance with the purely mythological interpretation. Could the Paiute legend of the CTK be a direct, albeit orally preserved, historical account of a real conflict with a giant race? Is it possible that the red hair was not a symbol, but a distinguishing physical feature of a long-lost people, a unique trait remembered and passed down through generations, rather than a mere invention of myth? Some alternative theories propose that these CTK were indeed a distinct, pre-Paiute population, a giant race whose demise was so significant it was enshrined in the tribal memory. If the Paiute story of the CTK is a literal recounting of history, a memory of a colossal struggle against an actual race of giants, then what other ancient conflicts and forgotten peoples are hidden within America's vast and underappreciated native lore? How many other myths are, in fact, forgotten history? Not all indigenous legends portray giants as antagonists or destructive forces. Many traditions across North America speak of giants in a different light, as the first people asterisk, the asterisk original inhabitants asterisk, or even as powerful asterisk builders and rulers who shaped the ancient landscape. For example, the Iroquois and Cherokee, among others, have tales of ancient beings of great stature who were instrumental in creating or organizing the world around them. These benevolent giants were sometimes depicted as teaching early humans essential skills, laying down laws, or even physically moving mountains and diverting rivers to form the land as it is today. These kinds of tales are typically explained as creation myths or origin stories, where larger-than-life figures embody foundational concepts, primordial forces, or the very act of Genesis. Their role as builders or creators might be seen as a metaphorical way to explain the origin of large natural formations or ancient structures, attributing them to a divine or superhuman agency rather than the mundane efforts of ordinary humans. This perspective again places these narratives firmly in the symbolic realm, detached from literal historical events. However, when these narratives are considered alongside the very real evidence of massive earthworks, monumental mounds, and impossibly large tools discussed in earlier acts, these stories of giants as primordial builders take on an eerie and potent new resonance. The idea of colossal beings as the original architects of the land aligns remarkably with the physical evidence of constructions that defy the known capabilities of conventional human hands. It suggests a direct correlation between memory and tangible structure. Could these stories be more than just allegories? Could they be cultural memories of an actual early civilization of giants, a race possessing not only the immense strength, but also the knowledge and organization to undertake the construction of some of the very monumental structures that baffle us today. Perhaps these legends are not merely symbolic tales, but a remembered history of a race that literally built parts of ancient America, a testament to their physical power and their societal structure. The idea that these structures were built by their ancestors is consistently rejected by mainstream archaeology. Conventional anthropology might attribute these pervasive common themes to shared archetypes deeply embedded in the human psyche, or universal mythological patterns that emerge independently across cultures. Alternatively, it might suggest very ancient, deeply rooted Proto-American mythologies that diffused over vast periods and distances, evolving in isolation but retaining core elements. These explanations attempt to account for the similarities without resorting to the idea of actual, physical encounters with giants. But the level of specific detail, the recurring physical descriptions, and the consistent narrative arcs across so many disparate cultures, spanning thousands of miles, argues against mere coincidence or abstract archetypes. It's not just a big man in the stories. It's often a very specific type of big man, with particular characteristics and historical roles that resonate from one tribal tradition to another. The details are too precise, too often repeated, and too geographically dispersed to be easily dismissed. Could this widespread consistency be powerful, compelling evidence for a shared historical memory, a collective recollection of an actual Pan-American race of giants? Perhaps these diverse tribes, through their ancestors, encountered the same extraordinary people, or their legends stem from a much older, unified oral tradition about a truly pervasive giant presence across the continent. Such a shared memory would imply not only the existence of these giants, but also their widespread dominion or influence, shaping the early history of entire regions. If hundreds of distinct indigenous cultures, geographically separated and linguistically diverse, independently recorded strikingly similar memories of giants, their appearance, their deeds, their ultimate fate, what does this tell us about the nature of ancient history and the reliability of oral traditions as a legitimate source of historical truth? Could the very stories we've dismissed as myth be the key to unlocking a forgotten chapter of human history, a secret reign of giants in ancient America that precedes all known narratives? The persistent whisper of these ancient voices challenges us to reconsider what we truly know about the past. The whispers of ancient peoples, passed down through generations, speak of colossal beings that once strode across this land. These oral traditions, rich with detail and surprisingly consistent across disparate cultures, offer a powerful challenge to our established understanding of early America. But what happens when the echoes of myth find themselves confronted by tangible, physical evidence? What happens when those very physical proofs seem to simply vanish? For centuries, across the vast and varied landscapes of North America, accounts of extraordinary discoveries filled local newspapers, scientific journals, and personal letters. These were not merely tales of tall men, but consistent reports of skeletal remains far exceeding typical human dimensions, sometimes 7 feet, often 8, and occasionally even larger. These finds were often stumbled upon by farmers plowing fields, railway workers excavating new lines, or early archaeologists investigating ancient mounds. The widespread nature of these discoveries, from the fertile river valleys of Ohio to the dusty plains of Nevada, created a picture of a continent with a far more complex and enigmatic past than we typically imagine. Yet, as the 20th century dawned, a curious silence began to settle over these extraordinary reports. The flurry of articles and local excitement seemed to fade, replaced by a puzzling void where once there had been bustling conversation and compelling evidence. It's as if a great historical broom had swept across the land, tidying away inconvenient truths and leaving behind a carefully curated emptiness. This silence, however, only serves to amplify a profound and unsettling anomaly: the alleged systematic suppression and dismissal of these giant discoveries by institutions tasked with preserving history. The claims are specific and persistent, pointing to a deliberate effort to control the narrative of early American history. Imagine a network, not of conspiracy, but of established academic and scientific bodies, which, by their very nature, become the arbiters of truth. When reports of impossibly large human remains emerged, often accompanied by grave goods or situated within megalithic structures that defied conventional understanding, these institutions frequently became involved. They were the ones with the resources, the expertise, and the authority to properly excavate, study, and preserve such finds. But the mystery deepens when we examine what happened after these discoveries were placed in institutional care. Perhaps no institution is more frequently at the center of these allegations than the esteemed Smithsonian Institution. For generations, whispers and direct accusations have circulated, claiming that the Smithsonian, the nation's premier museum and research complex, systematically collected these anomalous giant remains only to effectively make them disappear. Anecdotal accounts, some from former employees, suggest that crates of oversized bones arrived at the Smithsonian's vast storage facilities, only to be later declared lost, misidentified, or simply reclassified as normal human remains. Consider the Lovelock Cave in Nevada, a site famous for the discovery of what were described by early accounts as incredibly tall, red-haired mummies. While the mainstream narrative acknowledges significant archaeological finds at Lovelock, the specific details regarding the colossal stature of some of the remains, once widely reported, seem to have been downplayed or entirely omitted from later official records. Similarly, across the mound builder regions of the Midwest, numerous newspaper reports detailed the excavation of giant skeletons from ancient earthworks. These finds were often sent to institutions for further study, and it is here, in the hallowed halls of academia and curation, that the trail often goes cold. The expectation would be for these unique specimens to be proudly displayed, rigorously studied, and extensively documented. Instead, a pervasive sense of absence hangs over their fate. The mainstream explanation for this perplexing disappearance of giant skeletons is multifaceted and, on the surface, entirely logical. Firstly, there's the issue of scientific debunking. Early archaeology, especially in the 19th century, was a nascent field. Techniques were less refined, measurements could be inaccurate, and the excitement of discovery sometimes outpaced rigorous scientific verification. Many reported giants might simply have been exceptionally tall individuals, or perhaps bones mistakenly identified due to poor preservation or incomplete reconstruction. Skulls could be elongated by artificial cranial deformation, leading to misinterpretation of overall size. Secondly, hoaxes and exaggerations were not uncommon. Sensationalist journalism thrived on extraordinary tales, and local pride might have led communities to embellish the size of a local discovery. A large animal bone could easily be mistaken for a human femur by an untrained eye, fueling local lore. Thirdly, preservation issues played a significant role. Bones, especially ancient ones, are fragile. Exposure to air, improper handling, or unsuitable storage conditions could lead to rapid deterioration and loss of specimens. Over time, collections might have been consolidated, recatalogued, or simply discarded if deemed to be duplicates or of insufficient scientific merit by later, more discerning archaeologists. From this perspective, the vanishing of these giant reports and remains is simply the natural progression of science correcting its errors and refining its understanding, leaving behind only what can be definitively proven. But there's a persistent problem with this mainstream explanation. The sheer asterisk volume of consistent reports, spanning nearly 2 centuries and geographically diverse regions, defies easy dismissal as mere misidentification or isolated hoaxes. It's one thing for a single exaggerated report to surface. It's quite another for hundreds, even thousands, of distinct accounts to describe remains consistently in the 7 to 12-foot range, often with double rows of teeth or unusual cranial features, only for them all to eventually vanish from official discourse. The consistent narratives emerging from a period before widespread communication and scientific centralization suggests a reality on the ground that was difficult to ignore. Furthermore, the but moment forces us to ask, why do so many trails lead back to the same institutional doorways, particularly the Smithsonian, only for the evidence to disappear behind them? Why, in an era increasingly capable of scientific preservation and documentation, did so many unique and potentially paradigm-shifting finds simply become lost? The shift in narrative is profound. What began as a widespread, reported phenomenon across America has, by the modern era, been largely relegated to the realm of fringe theories and forgotten lore. This isn't just about individual errors. It hints at a deeper, more systemic process at play. The cumulative weight of these disappearances casts a long, unsettling shadow on the official version of history. This pattern of disappearance, therefore, naturally gives rise to an alternative, more unsettling theory, that there was a deliberate, systematic cover-up, an erasure of inconvenient truths designed to maintain an established historical narrative. Some researchers believe that the primary motivation for such a grand-scale operation was to preserve the accepted timeline and understanding of human migration to the Americas. The prevailing scientific paradigm, which posits that Homo sapiens arrived in North America relatively recently via the Bering Strait and developed culturally over time, would be profoundly challenged by evidence of an earlier, distinct, and colossal race. Such a discovery would necessitate a radical reevaluation of human origins, migrations, and the very concept of civilization on the continent. An institution like the Smithsonian, as a guardian of national history and scientific orthodoxy, might have felt compelled to protect the integrity of the established narrative, even if it meant suppressing conflicting evidence. The potential motivations extend beyond mere scientific paradigm shifts. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, societal and political factors may have also played a role. The idea of a pre-Native American giant race could have been deemed culturally problematic, complicating narratives of manifest destiny and the prevailing views on indigenous populations. If these giants were seen as a sophisticated, pre-existing civilization, it could have undermined certain justifications for colonial expansion and the treatment of Native American peoples. Some theorize that such a discovery might have granted certain Native American tribes, whose legends spoke of giants, an unwelcome validation, or conversely, created new anxieties about land claims and historical precedents. From a purely academic standpoint, newly established scientific institutions were also keen to solidify their authority and control over historical interpretation. Fringe or anomalous discoveries, particularly those championed by amateur archaeologists or local reports, might have been seen as a threat to nascent professionalization, leading to an institutional bias towards debunking rather than validating anything that deviated from the norm. The methods of this alleged suppression, according to proponents of this theory, were varied and effective. It wasn't necessarily a clandestine, shadowy organization, but rather a series of actions within existing structures. This could have involved reclassifying giant remains as unusually tall individuals, or even as animal bones. It might have included confiscation of evidence from amateur discoverers, with promises of scientific study that never materialized publicly. Active debunking campaigns could have discredited individuals who persisted in reporting such finds. And perhaps most insidiously, a deliberate loss of records, either through poor archival practices or intentional purging, could have ensured that the evidence simply ceased to exist in the official historical memory. Accounts from families whose ancestors donated giant bones to museums, only to find no trace of them years later, fuel these claims of deliberate erasure. The vastness of institutional storage, the complexity of cataloging, and the sheer volume of artifacts provide ample opportunity for an inconvenient truth to simply fade into obscurity. So if these claims hold even a kernel of truth, if there was a systematic effort to erase the physical evidence of a giant race in ancient America, then we are left with a profound and unsettling question. What was the true motivation behind such a grand-scale erasure, and what profound truths might have been buried alongside the bones? If the guardians of history chose to silence a significant chapter of the past, what greater secrets might still lie hidden, not just beneath the earth, but within the carefully constructed narratives we accept as absolute truth? The mystery of why inconvenient truths vanish from official records forces us to reconsider the very nature of historical knowledge and wonder what else we might be missing. We have drifted through the shadowy corridors of history, exploring the persistent echoes of a forgotten past. From the whispered tales of colossal bones to the silent majesty of impossibly crafted earthworks, and the vibrant legends passed down through countless generations, the individual fragments we've unearthed begin to coalesce. These disparate threads, when woven together, paint a compelling, yet unsettling, picture that suggests something profoundly different about ancient America. Mainstream historical narratives, of course, prefer to categorize these intriguing phenomena as isolated curiosities. The oversized bones are dismissed as anomalies, misidentified specimens, or even hoaxes. The monumental earthworks are attributed, often with great certainty, to known Native American cultures, their impressive scale a testament to collective human ingenuity. The widespread legends, rich with tales of towering figures, are gracefully reinterpreted as myth, allegory, or metaphorical expressions of human conflict or natural forces. This approach allows the established timeline and understanding of the continent's peopling and development to remain largely undisturbed, a reassuringly ordered sequence of events. But there is a problem with this fragmented dismissal. When we consider the sheer consistency, the staggering number, and the widespread geographical distribution of these reports from across vastly different locations and cultures, the casual dismissal of each piece, one by one, begins to crumble. The combined weight of giant skeletal discoveries, often documented in local chronicles and newspapers before disappearing, alongside the enduring mysteries of structures built with seemingly impossible effort, and the pervasive oral traditions that speak of a distinct, powerful race of giants, forms a pattern. This pattern suggests not a collection of unrelated anomalies, but a coherent narrative, hinting at a unified, forgotten chapter of American history. Could it be that these many echoes point not to disparate curiosities, but to a profound truth, obscured by time and perhaps by human intention? If so, what grander story might they be trying to tell us about the foundational layers of this land? If this pre-native giant race were a genuine historical reality, their very existence would ripple through and fundamentally rewrite foundational chapters of our understanding of human history itself. The implications extend far beyond a mere addition to the historical record. They challenge the established narratives of human migration, the development of early civilizations, and even the very capabilities we attribute to ancient peoples. Our current, accepted understanding of human origins in the Americas largely follows well-trodden paths. The Bering Strait theory, successive waves of migration from Asia, and a relatively defined timeline for the emergence of early human populations and their cultural developments. This framework provides a comforting sense of order and progression, mapping out the journey of humanity across continents. But the persistent echoes we've explored, suggesting the presence of a sophisticated, large-bodied civilization, potentially predating or coexisting with established timelines, fundamentally disrupts this meticulously constructed model. Where did these giants come from? How did they fit into the human family tree? The sheer scale of their purported biological differences, alongside the monumental efforts attributed to them, would demand a complete reassessment of our understanding of ancient human presence in the Americas. It would force us to ask if the human story on this continent is far older and far more complex than our current textbooks suggest. Theories, then, unfurl in intriguing directions. Could the presence of such a race point to previously unknown migratory waves, perhaps from origins far more remote than commonly considered, even across oceans thought impassable to ancient mariners? Or might it suggest entirely different evolutionary pathways, a distinct branch of hominids, or even a unique variant of the human species that developed and thrived on the North American continent? The ramifications extend to genetics, anthropology, and our very definition of what it means to be human. If these giants were real, the settled narratives of human journey and development become far less certain, opening up vast, unexplored territories in our understanding of the deep past. How much of humanity's true story, then, remains hidden, just beneath the carefully arranged surface of what we accept as fact? Yet, even with this growing body of consistent, compelling evidence, the official narrative stands firm, seemingly unyielding to reconsideration. Mainstream archaeology and history, deeply rooted in established methodologies and rigorous peer review, often exhibit a strong, almost protective, resistance to seriously considering such radical shifts. Scholarly pursuits prioritize verifiable, repeatable data, maintaining a framework built on decades, even centuries, of accepted research. New discoveries are typically assimilated into existing paradigms, subtly refining our understanding rather than overturning it entirely. The vast machinery of academia, with its institutions, journals, and career paths, operates on these principles, and a radical reevaluation of fundamental assumptions is a rare and arduous process. But when faced with the widespread accounts of physical evidence, the enduring cultural memories, and particularly the documented patterns of disappearing evidence from Act 5, this steadfastness can begin to appear less like pure scientific caution and more like institutional inertia, or even a protective stance around established paradigms. Is it solely a commitment to scientific rigor, or does it also reflect a deep-seated reluctance to admit the possibility of a colossal oversight, to dismantle a carefully constructed historical edifice? The implications of accepting a pre-native giant race are so profound that they would necessitate a re-examination of numerous other accepted historical facts, potentially causing a cascade effect across various fields of study. Some postulate that the sheer inertia of established academic thought makes such radical shifts incredibly difficult, akin to turning a massive ship. Others wonder if acknowledging such a past would unravel too many other accepted truths, perhaps even challenging the very foundations of archaeological practice and the careers built upon them. There are those who quietly suggest a fear of opening the floodgates to endless fringe theories, an understandable concern. But what is the true cost of clinging to an incomplete picture when the echoes of the past suggest a different, potentially more profound, story? Could it be that the system itself, designed for stability, inadvertently becomes a barrier to truths that are simply too inconvenient? What we are left with, then, is not a series of disconnected oddities, but a profound and consistent pattern, hinting at an historical canvas that is far from complete. When we step back and view the entire tapestry, the numerous reports of colossal skeletal remains, the silent grandeur of monumental earthworks, the widespread and strikingly similar Native American oral traditions speaking of giants, and the perplexing pattern of documented historical suppression, it no longer feels like individual anomalies. Instead, it feels like a systemic pattern, a missing piece in our grand historical puzzle, demanding attention. Current historical models, of course, are always evolving, embracing new finds and refining understanding, yet they mostly operate within an established, well-understood framework, assuming that new data will largely fill in existing gaps. But the cumulative weight of this specific evidence, the tales of beings beyond our current understanding, the structures that challenge our engineering assumptions, and the repeated accounts of their fading from official record, suggests not just gaps, but perhaps entire erased chapters. It implies not merely missing details within a familiar story, but a fundamental omission, a foundational element that has been overlooked or, more controversially, deliberately removed. This consistent narrative, spanning centuries and cultures, argues for more than just the natural attrition of knowledge over time. It speaks to a profound absence that actively shapes our understanding, or misunderstanding, of America's deep past. Could it be that time itself has simply eroded the clearest answers, reducing once vibrant histories to faint echoes? Or were there conscious efforts, perhaps motivated by various intentions, to redefine a past that no longer served the present, to simplify a complex reality into a more digestible form? Perhaps we are simply asking the wrong questions of the remaining fragments, our modern lens ill-equipped to decipher the true meaning of these ancient clues. What other profound historical realities, then, might lie just beyond our current perception, waiting for us to truly see and acknowledge them, if only we dared to look beyond the accepted view? If we truly allow for the possibility of this vanished giant race, the canvas of ancient America transforms, revealing a myriad of fascinating, yet unsettling, alternative realities. Our current accepted history posits clear paths of human movement, with indigenous cultures developing sequentially across the land, their stories largely accounted for within known frameworks. It paints a picture of gradual development, resourcefulness, and adaptation within environmental constraints. This familiar narrative provides a coherent, if perhaps overly simplified, understanding of the continent's deep history, connecting today's populations to ancestral origins. But the scale of their purported achievements, the sheer biological distinction suggested by the historical accounts of giant skeletons, hints at a departure from these familiar narratives. Could they have been the remnants of a highly advanced lost civilization, possessing knowledge and techniques far beyond what we attribute to their supposed era, perhaps even from a time far more ancient than we currently imagine? Such a scenario would imply a level of technology or societal organization that predates our known historical benchmarks, challenging our assumptions about the pace of human progress. Or could they represent a completely unknown wave of migration, a group of people arriving from an origin point currently unconsidered, perhaps even before the accepted first peoples, or from across oceans thought impassable to ancient mariners? This would necessitate a radical rethinking of global ancient navigation and connectivity. And then there are those who ponder a truly radical possibility, a unique, divergent branch of human evolution, a distinct species of humanity thriving on this continent, perhaps for millennia, their very biology dictating their monumental feats. This scenario pushes the boundaries of our biological and anthropological understanding, suggesting a plurality of human forms that challenges the unity of the human species as we understand it. What if the story of humanity is far grander and far stranger than our textbooks dare to print, filled with lost civilizations, unknown migrations, and even different forms of human existence? As we drift to the close of our journey through America's forgotten past, the true anomaly isn't just the giants themselves, but the profound realization that our planet, our history, holds secrets far grander than we can easily fathom. The consistent echoes we've explored, the bones, the mounds, the legends, the suppression, suggest a fundamental incompleteness in our understanding of ancient America. Science continually pushes forward, striving to uncover every hidden detail, confident that, with time and diligence, all mysteries will eventually be illuminated, that every puzzle piece will find its place in a coherent, verifiable picture. This relentless pursuit of knowledge is the bedrock of our understanding, providing a sense of comfort that ultimately all truths will be revealed. But when we observe the consistent pattern of lost artifacts, the convenient category